Hi, Alex Recaps here. Today I will tell you a story about a Jewish girl, Rachel Stein, who infiltrated in the Gestapo to find the murderers of her parents. Film begins with the arrival of a tourist group in the Israeli city kibbutz in October 1956. One of the girls, by Nan Ronnie, takes pictures Ophelia, the surrounding beauty, and hears children sing from a nearby school. Looking through the window, Ronnie discovers Alice, who she has not seen her for 12 years since the last meeting. So much time had passed that Alice did not immediately recognize the girl. A short stop comes to an end and Ronnie heads off with the tour group, promising to write Ellis a letter. Girl goes to the shore where her memories are transferred to Holland in the 1944. Rachel hides in a foster family. They know that the girl is Jewish, so they ask her children to call her by the name of Alice so that the German soldiers would not take her away. Girl's real parents are alive, but Rachel doesn't know where they are. After dinner, girl goes to the shore of a lake to lie down on the pier. On the boat, her friend Rob swims up to her, frightening Alice with a German speech as an apology. Girl asks for a boat ride, but at that moment, a downed German bomber appears over the lake. To lighten the weight of the aircraft, it dropped bombs, one which falls on the house of Alice's adoptive parents. After that, Rob hides girl at his home by organizing her place to live in greenhouse. Alice thinks it's even better now, at least she doesn't have to learn prayers and say them every time. Before dinner, a car enters the courtyard. A man getting out of the car immediately goes to the greenhouse. Once inside, he says the real name of the girl on the burn farm the German soldiers found. Documents in the name of Rachel Stein, and also saw boats sailing away from the shore, the number on the sail of which led Van Hang here. Germans passed the information to the gave his police control. From their information got to the resistance, whose participants are Van Hang having advised her to run away from here. Man goes out into the street and Rachel rushes after him, having stopped the car. Girl asked for his help. Van Hang agrees to move Rachel and Rob to a safer location for which they should be ready tomorrow morning. They don't need to take anything's only money, so that can live on something for the first time in a foreign country. In the morning, Rachel goes with Rob to the notary, to a good friend of her father. Girl tells him about plans to get out to the free zone, but she needs money for at least a year of living. Father told Rachel that if she needed help she could go to a notary, Wim Smell, and he will definitely help her. Smell takes out a wad of money and jewelry, but asks girl the sign to show her father that he hand over money and jewels to Rachel. Hearing about her father, girl asks if he knows where he is. Smale says that he does not know and does not want to know, because in any case he will not be able to give out their location to the German soldiers thanks to his connections. When Hayan has no difficulty in transporting Rachel and other Jews through a German checkpoint under the guise of prisoners, they stop at a manor where the girl meets her parents and brother, who recently had an appendicitis operation. They learned that Rachel decided to go to the free zone and decided go with her. Then Hand leads everyone to the raft on which the Jews set off. Man himself comes back wishing them good luck. At night, Rob strikes up a conversation with Skipper while Rachel talks her parents. Suddenly the light turns on and shooting starts from the patrol German boats. The Nazis shoot everyone on the raft, but Rachel manages to jump into the water and escape hiding among the reeds. Girl watches how the Germans drive the bodies of the dead to the shore, after which they search them and take precious things. Girl remembers the face of German officer who was leader of them. Sometime later in the blog post, the soldiers stop the hearse. They demand to open the coffin, despite a warning that inside is the body of a girl who died of chain typhus. Rachel lies in the coffin, afraid of being infected. Soldiers let the hearse pass. From the conversation of the guys in the garage where Rachel was brought, we understand that after the execution on the lake, a girl lost consciousness. Farmer who found Rachel on the shore reported about her to the resistance group, so the guys ask her to thank him after the war for not handing her over to the Germans. Once in the city, girl leads an ordinary, unremarkable life under the name of Ellis de Vries. After 5 months, the leader resistance group, Herbert Kuiper, offers Rachel a new job. Girl is brought to the meeting of the detachment. It turns out they have decided that Rachel will play the role of Hans Ackermann's wife on tomorrow's assignment. The Germans are not very much stick to married couples. At night, the detachment organizes the reception of parcels divided into 3 groups. They turn on searchlights to mark the drop site where the containers are dropped from the aircraft, inside which are different radio components and products. One of them has a microphone that needs to be discreetly installed at the headquarters of the Nazis, but for Tim this is not a problem because he is a telephone operator and constantly repair telephones at the headquarters of the enemy. Suddenly the gates of a hangar fly apart and an armored car with German soldiers drives inside bearing a script. Has managed to kill all the Nazis. Hans doesn't understand how they got here because there were never German soldiers around this places. In the morning, Hans and Rachel are on the train carrying in suitcases which was dropped in containers from the plane. Noticing the German soldiers, a couple begins to kiss, but hearing that Germans demand that the passengers open their suitcases, Hans decides to start shooting and distract the soldiers so that Rachel can escape with their suitcases. Instantly realizing what to do, girl slaps Hans, calling him a pervert who supposedly paws her. Taking the suitcases, Rachel calmly leaves and inspects the compartment. Carriage girl keeps company with a German officer whom the soldiers will definitely not inspect bypassing the carriage's trollers look into the compartment Ludwig moves where actual leaves through his album of stamps Ludovic orders soldiers to leave immediately by which saves the girl without suspecting a train arrives at the station coming out from the platform girl says goodbye to Ludwig refusing from his help to bring her with these heavy suitcases Rachel goes to Hans. Who knows Ludwig the chief of German intelligence it is he who was guilty of the death of many militias. The next day several members of the resistance fall into the hands of the Germans who accidentally discover that the guys are transferring weapons in the back of a truck hiding them among the vegetables. The leader's son also gets to the Germans' resistance having lost to several fighters. The detachment decides to stop further operation to rescue the guys. Herbert asks Rachel to get close to Ludwig. Rachel agrees even if she has to sleep with Ludwig. Girl goes to the Gestapo to meet with Müntze as a gift. Rachel brought in the stamps that he's so missed in his album. Treats girl with a chocolate that was dropped from the plane in containers a few days ago. It's time for Ludwig to go so officer invites Rachel to the party with him. They come to the lair of Nazis among whom girl recognizes the very officer Günther who killed her parents at the end of the evening. Rachel asks Ludwig to show him his stamp collection. Officer takes girl to his room. Ludwig starts to undress Rachel and girl is ready for everything. Looking at her hair Lubbock says that Rachel used to be a brunette. Usually Jewish women dye their hair blonde to survive. Taking his hands Rachel puts them on her chest that on thighs asking if it looks like Jewish. After making love girl goes to the toilet where she meets Ronnie the same girl from the beginning of the film. Ronnie is a collaborator after Günther appears in the toilet and Ronnie tells him that Rachel wants to work here the headquarters like her governor believes that the singer is just needed here, but she needs to pass a medical examination. Ronnie opens up Rachel's shirt showing the girl's chest with the words that everything is in order with her health, but everything that Günther sees belongs to Ludwig. The next day comes Günther interrogates the leader's son resistance after which he brings Ronnie and Rachel sheets with Tim's confessions stamped out asking the girls to print them out after making several copies. Rachel returns to her office having met in the elevator with a notary. Smellman came to protect the captive guys. He enhanced Rexel a microphone that the militia was going to install the headquarters, but the operation had to be cancelled due to the arrest of the guys coming out from elevator. Rachel meets Ronnie who asks her to help prepare the headquarters hall for the first birthday. Here Ludwig appears to whom Günther informs that all three guys confessed everything and tomorrow they will be executed. Only Ludwig's signature is needed. Officer orders not to shoot prisoners, which puzzles Günther. Rachel returns to her office which borders on Günther's office. While he is gone girl puts a microphone in one of the paintings after which Rexel goes to the shelter of the resistance group. Everyone is laughing as they listen how Günther makes love with Ronnie. Someone comes to Günther. The stranger says that he has very little left to 500,000 Jews. Rachel recognizes his voice. This is Van Heinen, the same man who organized the escape of the Jews on a raft through the swamp on a tip from Günther. Then Heine collects wealthy Jews promising to send them to Belgium and Günther with a firing squad destroys them taking all the money and jewelry, a share of which he gives to Van Hahn. The collaborator receives from Günther a new list of wealthy Jews whom he will collect soon to save them. Rachel offers to kill Günther or Van Hahn, but Smale says that on behalf of the resistance leader Herbert he agreed with Ludwig that they would not attack the Germans and in exchange they would not shoot the prisoners, among whom was the leader's son Tim Kuiper. Rachel is furious that the resistance is ready to sacrifice the Jews for their Dutch prisoners. She's about to leave, but girls stop by Hans. He also wants to save Jews and offers to kidnap and Hend. From the overheard conversation Hans realized that someone was calculating rich Jews and creating a list for Günther and Van Heyen. Looks like he even understood who it is, therefore they are in need to interrogate him and Hans knows how to do it commonly so that no one would know anything. Hans and Rachel along with other members of the resistance organize an ambush on Van Hengen but plan to capture and fails. Then Heine escapes and then attacks Hans who is chasing him. Rachel tries to save Hans but Van Heine attacks her and starts strangling girl, causing one of the participants resistance has to shoot him. Upon learning of this Herbert is furious. According to him, Mount Günther will now shoot 40 hostages held by the Nazis, including his son Herder. Hans, along with his accomplices, decides to go and surrender because Van Hein's death is their fault. But Smell stops guys. It's a plan of Gestapo. When the building was still a bank, they are can try to get there and rescue captives. After the unsuccessful kidnapping of Van Hein, Rachel returns to Ludwig. The officer hides a gun under the blanket, which he points at the girl and would guess that she was Jewish, and then on the train she sat down with him, not all by chance. Moreover, as soon as she got a job in the Gestapo, the best Günther's agent and Hang was immediately killed. Ludwig demands to tell him everything, otherwise he will hand over the girl to Günther. Next morning Ludwig and Calder come to Günther's office to search his safe, in which according to Rachel Günther hides money and jewelry of the murdered Jews. The murder of Jews is not a crime, but for the fact that Günther appropriated the jewelry for himself and did not transfer them to the Third Reich is punishable by a death sentence. Günther is forced to open a safe in which, apart from documents and a bottle of champagne prepared for Hitler on the 5th anniversary of the operation to liberate the world from Jews, there is nothing. Carter asks him to excuse him, is about to leave. Günther stops him. According to him, Ludwig is connected with resistance group and promised them not to shoot the prisoners. Günther confesses, and in his Defense says that the Russians are already near Berlin, therefore he proposes to stop shedding blood and mitigate his punishment when the Germans lose the war. For his connection with the resistance, Calder accuses Ludwig of treason and promises to personally command his execution. Meanwhile, the resistance is preparing to infiltrate the Gestapo. Rachel appears in the hangar. She asks to get the arrested Ludwig out of captivity, otherwise she will not support them. Rachel returns to the Gestapo while everyone is busy. Girl goes down to the boiler room where she breaks the door lock. At this time, a truck arrives at the headquarters. Inside, resistance fighters dressed as German soldiers they brought captives for tomorrow's execution, who are also malicious thanks to the fact that Rachel broke the lock. Hans, with the fighters, enters the boiler room while the girl entertains the Nazis with her singing. The militias get into the room with the cameras starting to free the prisoners. At some point, German soldiers run out of the cells, opening fire on the resistance. Günther knew about the impending attempt to free the hostages, so if you organize an ambush, and at the end we'll see who reported the information of all the militia. Only Hans and Theo was an old-timer outside managed to survive. They arrive at the hideout and tell Herbert about the ambush. At this time, the microphone in the office of Günther, who brought Rachel there for a conversation, turns on again. The officer knows about the microphone in his office, so the soldiers guide the girls, and Günther specifically thanks Rachel for the information about the upcoming resistance sortie in the Gestapo, so that the militias think that Rachel is Günther's informant. Considering the girl guilty of the death of his son, Herbert swears to take revenge on Rachel at all costs and got the promises to shoot the girl together with Ludwig at dawn. Meanwhile, Ronnie entertains the German officers, and one of the soldiers enters the boiler room where he knocks out the guard and releases Ludwig, who frees Rachel. The couple hides in a tent because the girl is considered a traitor and it is dangerous for her to stay in the city because the militia will look for her. At this time, the radio announces that the German troops in Holland, Germany, and Denmark have capitulated, which means the end of the war. In the morning, Günther, having packed his suitcases, goes to Hamburg on a boat, but the ship stalls halfway to the goal. Gunders sends his assistant to check what happened, and without waiting for him, Günther himself goes down to the engine room where he finds body of the murdered assistant. Hans appears and kills Günther. Meanwhile, columns of Allied troops are passing through the streets of the cities. Everyone is celebrating victory over the forces of Nazi Germany. Rachel and Ludwig make their way through the crowd. Hearing Ronnie's voice, the girl goes to her. She rides in a jeep in an embrace with a soldier, telling Rachel that she now has a new boyfriend. Ronnie offers to go for a ride, but Rachel refuses and moves on with Ludwig. Meanwhile, on the square, girls who provide services to the Germans are trim on their bald heads. Rachel with Ludwig comes to the notary Smell, whom the girl suspects of having links with Günther. Smell claims that he has nothing to do with it. Of those who survived, not only he knew about the microphone and the militias were going to infiltrate the Gestapo and free the prisoners. Together with his wife, he did a little research and studied the notes in his black notebook, which indicate one of the members of the resistance. The notary can show these notes only to members of the Canadian counterintelligence, who should arrive minute by minute. The doorbell rings. Smell goes to open it, after which a shot sounds. The notary's wife goes to check what happened and also gets shot. Ludwig manages to fire a shot the fleeing man, but he manages to get lost in the crowd, and Ludwig himself is seized by members of the resistance who recognize him as a German officer. Hearing his scream on the street, Rachel looks out the window and is noticed by a man who is in a militia group. The soldiers rush after the girl and grab her, but Rachel manages to take Smale's notebook. Ludwig is brought in for questioning, and Kathier is also present in the office, agreeing to cooperate with the Allied forces in order to save his life. Carter tells that the British Army officer about Ludwig's connections with the militia for which he was sentenced to death. Ludwig says that he wanted to avoid bloodshed, therefore he contacted the resistance. Calder takes out the order of those sentenced to death, where Ludwig's name is indicated. The British officer considers Cothier's decision to shoot Ludwig is stupid. After all, this officer is a valuable witness. However, the British Code of Military Laws recognizes the decision of the German courts-martial, so the British are obliged to execute Ludwig. If the British do not want to shoot Ludwig, then captured German soldiers can do this, as Kathier insists the sentence is carried out. The executed group is personally led by Cater. Meanwhile, the partisans are mocking the prisoners, forcing everyone undressed to the goal. Upon learning that Rachel sang to the Germans, one of the partisans beats girl for refusing to sing to them too. To punish Rachel, the contents of the cauldron are poured onto her, where the prisoners pour buckets of feces. Hans also appears here, who is a criminal in the Dutch army. He inflicts several blows with a fire hose on the partisan who beat Rachel, after which he drives everyone away by lifting Rachel from the floor. Hans takes the girl away. She is released from captivity and given personal belongings. Upon arrest, the same black notebook of the notary Smile. Hans brings Rachel to his place and shows suitcases full of gold and money. This is what he took from the boat of the murdered Günther. Among the trophies, girl finds a lighter, a gift from her father after Rachel's first performance on the Kaveri stage. To justify the girl, Hans promises to talk to Herbert, the leader of the resistance. Girl asked to arrange a meeting with the arrested Ludwig, but Hans stuns her with the news that some British officer ordered the execution of the death sentence against him, which horrifies Rachel. To calm the girl, Hans gives her an injection lying on the couch. Rachel notices a bottle of insulin. Hans says that he gave her an overdose from which girl will fall asleep forever and will soon meet her parents. Or maybe even with Ludwig, as Hans poses from the balcony for the crowd outside. Rachel reaches for his bag, which contains a chocolate bar. Having eaten a sweet, girl goes to the balcony and jumps into the crowd. Rising, Rachel rushes to run and Hans fails to catch up with the girl as the crowd picks him up in her arms, greeting their hero. Rachel turns to the allies who bring the girl to the burial place of the captive militias shot by the Germans. The exhumation is led by Herbert, which found his son Tim among the lifeless bodies. Upon learning that Rachel has arrived, he runs to the car wanting to kill the girl, but soldiers stop him, explaining that Rachel has information about who is the real traitor and who handed everyone over to the Nexus. Girl shows Herbert a notary's notebook in which he constantly wrote down everything. Hans was a doctor and knew exactly how much money someone had when people came to him for treatment, and then handed them over to Günther, who passed the information to Van Hein, who came to these Jews and offered his help in taking them to his zone free from hostilities. The main thing is to bring more money with themselves for accommodation. Rachel's parents also approached Hans for an appendicitis operation on a girl's brother. If the patients did not have money for treatment, Hans sent them to the no-carry smile. Judging by the notes in the notebook and the surviving documents in the Gestapo, Hans himself was arrested by the Germans earlier but then released from captivity. On the orders of Günther himself, Hans sacrificed his friends from the resistance so that after the war no one would ask him where all those Jews who came to him for treatment had gone. There is no way to arrest Hans, he just disappeared. The counterintelligence captain promises to inform all checkpoints of Hans' car number, and Rachel and Herbert arrive at their former shelter, where girl discovers Hans' car covered in Herbert notices the loss of the official hearse. Contacting the counterintelligence captain, Herbert learns that his hearse has just passed one of the roadblocks. They catch up with the company car, the driver of which is in cahoots with Hans, but Herbert manages to knock him out. Hans, who was hiding inside, begins to beat on the lid of the coffin, but Rachel sits on top of the lid and begins to screw in the screws. Realizing that Rachel is outside, Hans asks to let him out, but girl does not want to listen to him and twists and crosses, restricting air access to the coffin. Herbert stops the car at the lake. Together with a girl, they sit on the shore and talk until Hans stops showing signs of life. We are again transfers, the 1956. Rachel sits on the shore by the lake. Her children and her husband come running to her. The four of them go to the kibbutz when suddenly the silence is broken by explosions of shells. The Suez crisis was approaching.